Well, hello and welcome to Two Heads Are Better Than One, with me, Rod Grant.
And me, Cameron Wyllie.
And Cameron, I thought we'd kick off this Christmas extravaganza.
Christmas special.
Yeah, Christmas special, by having a little look at an email that we received from a head teacher in Indonesia. I won't say any more than that. And he brought up the point about toxic parents being so difficult in his school that they are basically bullying not just him, but also his teachers. And this is perhaps part of the issue with schools which charge fees. There's a certain entitlement, perhaps. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure that it's just restricted to schools that charge fees. I think there's been an absolute sea change in parental attitudes. I mean, I was very lucky. I'm just going to put in a wee disclaimer. I think that 95% of the parents who I dealt with throughout my career were very, very supportive of the school. But the tough bit is when you actually discipline their children, when you're either suspending them or talking about expelling them. Back in the day, I remember a parent once saying to me as I expelled his child, actually, I just don't think he deserves to be here. And these days, I think parents are tending more to reach for their mobile phones and contact their lawyers. I think that's problematic. When I was at school, if I did something wrong at school, my worry was not about the school, it was about my parents' reaction, or specifically my mother's reaction, which was, going to be 10 times worse than anything the school could do to me. And I think probably that is how it needs to be, that the parents need to be on side with the school. But it certainly isn't the first time I've heard of these issues at private international schools abroad. I have a number of friends who teach in such schools, and they have terrible problems with parents who really, really anticipate that their child should do better than they can do, often involving expensive tutoring, often involving cheating and lying, and often involving bribery. This last one I found quite interesting. I quite like the idea of people offering me a Rolex if their child got an A in higher English. That never oddly happened. Did it happen to you, Rod?
No, and not even offered, not even a hint. But I think, like you, I would have rather welcomed that kind of help, assistance. I think one of the situations that I'm suddenly casting my mind back to the late 80s, and I was working in a local authority school, and it was my first week, and I walked out into the playground to find two parents pulling each other's hair and punching each other and shouting and swearing, and the children were gathered around, and there was tears and gnashing of teeth and crying and wailing, and that was quite a fascinating introduction to the way that parents can sometimes see their children's education, because this was actually about something that happened between the two kids in the playground. And actually, what a terrible example. The two kids have fallen out with each other. What happens? The two mums go hell for leather. And they were literally knocking lumps at each other.
Well, Philip Larkin, famously did say, they fuck you up, your mum and dad. At the end of the day, violence breeds violence, and that's maybe something we can come back to in our next one, which is going to be on the very Christmassy topic of bullying.
Yeah.
But for the moment, let's move on to Christmas. I have to say, I did have a special jangly thing that I was going to bring, which sounds a wee bit like a sleigh bell that somebody gave me last Christmas, and I was going to go jingle jingle like that. So instead of using it, because I forgot to bring it, I'll just go jingle jingle from time to time just to fit the mood. Okay. I could also produce my ukulele and sing a Christmas carol or two, just as accompaniment to the chat, if you'd like that, Rod.
Why don't we do that for Christmas special too?
Yes.
Next year.
Then you could play the pipes, and it would all be very, very good. And because you were thinking probably that our listenership will have fallen off by that time.
Well,
so.
but I'm not casting aspersions.
Anyhow, so Christmas in schools, Rod.
Yeah.
What's your favourite memory of Christmas in schools?
Oh, at school it was tricky. I think there are two memories that actually stand out as a child. One was, I think, probably about primary 3, and we were doing our Christmas show, and I was going to be on the stage. And my parents were meant to supply some kind of costume for me. and I was to be dressed up as Santa Claus. And they managed to get cotton wool onto old pipe cleaners.
Lovely.
Yeah, and fit it round my ears so that I had a beard and a red anorak and red wellies. And I remember thinking, this is a really poor costume. I was only 6, but 6 or 7, I recognised the fact that this was a really poor costume.
Starred you.
It did scar me because I felt very uncomfortable on stage because I just didn't feel they didn't go the extra mile. And of course, there were other kids around me who were beautifully, immaculately dressed in perfect costumes. And I wasn't that boy. Yeah. So that's one thing from childhood that kind of stands out. But then there's another. In my first teaching post in an independent school, which was a small prep school, the head teacher would gather all the boarding children around, and there was only about 20. And they'd stretch down the stairs, they'd be given mince pies and fake mulled wine, and we'd sing Christmas carols. And actually, because it was an old house, an old mansion house, and there would be a roaring coal fire, and the kids were eating their mince pies, it was just the most lovely, warm feeling. Very, very Christmassy. Probably the most Christmassy I've actually ever felt in our school.
Well, I was a pupil at George Heriot's School in Edinburgh from the age of 5 to 18, the school which I then had the privilege of working in. And Heriot's always has a Christmas concert in the Usher Hall, just been last week. Very good it was too, let me say to the listenership who was there. But when I was a kid, Heriot's was famous for its choral music. And since my voice didn't break till I was about 25, I was quite often featured. And I have 2 recollections of that. The first of which was when I was about 8, when the 8-year-olds sang a song called the Cuckoo Song, at the end of which I did the solo, which went cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo. And I think it's fair to say my brother was 12 by that time, and he looked at me with such undisguised loathing from that point, which I thought would never, ever be exceeded. But it was, because even worse. So when I was 12 and my voice still hadn't broken, we got a new director of music, and all a lot of the choral stuff was kind of slightly swept away, and he liked to do experimental things. So he did. I think it was somebody's arrangement of nursery rhymes with a kind of orchestral group and the senior boys chorus. And one of them was Little Jack Horner, who, as you may recall, Rod sat in his corner. Yeah. And it was terrible music. It was because it was all done very slowly. Little Jack Horner sat in his corner. And you might see where this is going, because eventually I had to run off from the wings, holding my thumb aloft and say, "Oh, what a good boy have I!" And at that point, I have to say, I just think it was remarkable I was allowed back into the house. My parents very proud, of course.
So here's me scarred by a red anorak. That story is very scarring to me. If I had been that boy.
I think it confirmed me in my feeling that there was something different about me, Rod. That I didn't really fit in necessarily with the rugby playing ethic of my core group. Certainly I developed different skills, I think it's fair to say.
Do you want to hear a really sad Christmas story?
I'm expecting I'm about to, Rod.
You are.
Jingle.
It takes me back actually to this, where we started with parenting. And this was a very, very close friend of mine who relayed this story to me, probably about 10 years ago now, where a parent, so she was working in a nursery, private nursery, and the parent came in and asked to speak to the manager, and she came forward and said, "Yeah, how can I help you, Mrs. Bloody Bloody Blah?" And she said, "Oh, I was just checking. Is it right? Are you closed all day on Christmas Day?"
Wow.
Yeah. And you just think, that is a real, almost abdication of parental responsibility. And it's an extreme. So that's my horrible Christmas story. Do you have one?
Thank you for sharing that.
Well, I wanted to lighten the mood.
The mood. Yes. Good, good, Rod. Always lightening the mood. Jingle, jingle. Now, shall we move on? Moving on. Now, once I've stopped sobbing,
Yeah.
and attempted to find the child and adopt them. Can we talk a wee bit about nativities? Did you do nativities at Clifton Hall?
Yes, we did.
Yes, we did. He said something grimness of his demeanour.
Well, actually, to be honest, you had to take your hat off to the staff. 40 children, aged 3 and 4, getting them to do anything was actually quite remarkable.
I think that this is the time of years, I'm always saying this, that the parents should really, really, really thank teachers, because it's so tiring at Christmas. If you've got all these things to do and then all the extra stuff. There were two, in recent times, there were two nativities at Heriot's, one in the nursery and one in primary 1 and 2. And it was indicative of the very excellent education that George Heriot School awarded, that by primary 1 and 2, it was like a professional stage show. I mean, it was like something that had been written by Andrew Lloyd Webber or produced by Cameron McIntosh. The choreography, the lighting, it was just glorious, but not so necessarily the nativity one. And there were two things, because the nativity one you couldn't control in the same way. And I remember once it was so happy. I mean, it was just always so happy. Just kind of made me laugh and cry at the same time to think that I was kind of anything to do with this wonderful institution. Because there was one occasion once when this wee blonde boy, who looked actually, I have to confess, very like me when I was like 4 or 5, and he just stopped in the middle of what he was supposed to be doing and said, "Granny," because he saw his granny, and his granny, obviously completely sort of overwhelmed by it, just where it's going, "Hello, darling," like that back from the audience. So of course he made his way out to Granny, and it was just absolutely beautiful. He was not to be shepherded back into line by his teachers. But also, on another occasion, the 3 wise men presented themselves, and I don't know if this was deliberate, but they were a kind of cross-section of Heriot's society. One of them, who was clearly going to, 14 years later, probably be school captain, was clearly a wee rugby player in the making, kind of looked about quite confident. The second one was a sort of wizened intellectual with wee specs on. And the third one was a sort of dopey boy, but he was a very cheerful dopey boy, and his very presence on the stage was pleasing. I mean, the 3 of them together, it was a cross-section of George Heriot's School. Anyway, eventually they came towards the front of the stage. This was their moment. And the rugby player turned to the dopey boy and said, "You've forgotten your present. Go and get your present." And the dopey boy, honestly, this is true, the rugby playing boy put his own present down and went and got the dopey boy's present, and then they started. And it was wonderful. I mean, the whole thing was just absolutely beautiful.
These are the moments that, as a head, when you're, for parents too, you're sitting and you're watching 5 and 6-year-olds being themselves.
Well,
because there's an ability to act. Of course there is. Some of them have got great voices and they're funny and they take great pride in presenting, their lines well. But then you can't forget the fact they're 5. And that my favourite memory, and I'm sure this is probably true of nativities up and down the country, was Mary taking the baby Jesus out of the cradle by his ankles.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, kind of tapping the child against her legs.
Latter day parenting.
Yeah,
that's very, very funny. Very funny. Moving on. Staff parties, Rod. Did you have a staff party at Clifton Hall at Christmas?
Yes. I attended the first few. And then felt that, perhaps it would be better that I didn't attend because, how much detail can I go into?
Well, yes, I know exactly what you mean because we had the same problems. Actually, in both schools that I attended, for some reason at Stuart's Melville, when I worked at Stuart's Melville, I was eventually placed in charge of the staff children's party. And since I was not a parent, it just seemed slightly odd. And this was quite a big endeavour. I used to do it with another 2 members of staff, and we used to have to buy presents and organise games and probably to get the food arranged and all that kind of stuff. Well, the actual parents on the staff came and dumped the children and went off to do Christmas shopping. And it did seem a bit odd to me at the time, but it was also very, very, very funny, jingle, jingle, just in case anyone thought I was being bitter or resentful about that across the years. But the staff party at Harriet's was a bit of a bacchanalian orgy. And so we civilised it. It used to be held in the staff room at the very moment that 3:15 came at the end of the school day on the last Friday of term. And honestly, there were shocking scenes, shocking. You know who I'm talking about out there if you're listening. You don't you? Yes, I saw you.
Yeah, well, I think one of the early decisions I took was that any party involving staff should be taken off-site. And I do remember saying, if you ever find yourself in a compromising situation, a journalist asks you from what school that you're from, just make sure you say, I'm from Edinburgh Academy.
Well, actually, that's a journalist. That is funny. Actually, this is nothing to do with Christmas, jingle jingle. But I'm just going to tell a story that's completely nothing to do with Christmas now, and it concerns. It used to be the case when I started working at Harriet's. For about 4 or 5 years after that, the tradition continued that after prize giving on the last day, quite a lot of the staff would go with the sixth year to the pub. And it was usually pretty civilised, but there was one particular sixth year group, I should say a brilliant rugby team. They will know who I'm talking about, who I really, really liked. I taught a great many of them for years, and they were just a great bunch of boys and girls. And I find myself in a slightly odd situation because where was the pub up? It was up in Bruntsfield, this pub up in Bruntsfield, and they started singing a song which went, Wyllie is the captain of our ship, Wyllie is the captain of our ship. I was head of the sixth year by this time. But the ship must be a tanker because he's a bloody wanker, was this, and they sang this over and over again. And I got progressively less and less amused by it. And one of the girls was a little under the weather by this time, presumably due to some summer illness, but also possibly due to alcohol. And so I decided that I would bring her and a pal and take them home because one of them was really not very well. As I left, this man appeared in the thing, and he went in. I didn't pay any attention. He was a journalist from the Evening News who's just been passing. So that was not a very good moment, I have to say. But I got out fast. I'm not sure there were any staff left by that time, so they may have got away with it.
Yeah, it reminds me, actually, I was thinking back to school, and this is, again, not a Christmas thing, but just thinking about kids and what they get up to that parents never, ever find out. And one beautiful story that is absolutely true was at my secondary school. So I was at this stage probably about 16, and a group of 18-year-old boys from the sixth form, the week before the end of the year, and for them moving on to university or college or work or whatever, had decided that one member of staff that wasn't particularly popular was a chap who was a French teacher, and he, smoked a pipe, had a funny moustache, and wore a beret, and fancied himself as a Frenchman, I think, although he wasn't. Even to the extent that he drove one of those old 2CVs. Remember them?
Yes, yes.
So we appeared for assembly. I think it was Friday morning, only to find that all the benches in the assembly hall had been pushed to the side, and his 2CV was sitting in the middle of the assembly hall because it was late. So they had managed to carry it up the stone steps, through the front hall, and into the assembly hall. And I just thought, these stories would never, ever hit the press, and the press would never be actually interested in it. But isn't it fascinating what kids will get up to?
Well, I think it's really interesting because I'm just not sure. I think there's a lot of trouble in schools these days. In quite a lot of schools, there's quite a lot of trouble, but I'm not sure that trouble ever manifests itself in that way. I can remember in my first year of teaching, going up the stairs on April Fool's Day, and my boss came out of his room and he said, "Come and look at this." But there was nothing to see because every single thing had been removed from his room. And it had been removed by some group of 60ers who had just decided that it was April Fool's Day, so they'd go and remove everything from Mr. Fraser's room. And so it was. There was literally nothing in the room, and he just. I mean, on one level he was very angry, but on one level he was always very. And I was quite impressed. I thought that was really good. But I'm not sure kids. I don't know if they do things like that anymore.
I think they do.
Things.
No, I think the way it goes now, certainly the stories that I've heard from colleagues working in both the state and independent sector, there tends to be a bit more of a nasty element.
Yes, I agree with that. And actually, interestingly, there is another school in the city, which I will not name, where they used to have a tradition that on a day towards the end of the school year, the 60 were allowed to do what I think they might have called pranks. And a lot of that used to be quite innocent and kind of fun, but then it all went horribly wrong one year because the pranks just got completely out of hand, and it sounded like a sort of ghastliness, and therefore, and it is hard that it's to do with the distinction between innocent naughtiness and a sort of vandalism, really,
Yeah.
and it is a reflection exactly of how young people feel about the place that they're being educated at.
Exactly. It's context, isn't it? It's the meaning behind it, because some things that happen in school can be hysterically funny.
Yeah.
But they're done almost in an affectionate way.
I think so, completely.
And there's a warmth. And then there are those moments in school where you think, actually, that was born out of a bad place.
Well, I can give an interesting example of this, actually, because not that this is very much to do with Christmas jingle, but in my book, I tell the story about my stick. So when I started teaching and, was a skinny, effeminate 23-year-old in a boys' school where macho-ness was quite an asset, my predecessor had left his stick, like a pointer,
yeah.
Except it's short. It was a sort of short pointer. And I used to just carry that about with me in class and tap it on the desk to get attention and things like that. And occasionally, it being 1980, tap the odd indolent boy on the head with it. But one of my classes, a third-year class, decided that it would be good sport to hide my pointer. And I went in one day, I couldn't find my pointer. And because I'm so tiny but obsessive about things like that, I hate losing things, I couldn't find it. And then I came back at lunchtime, there was a note, and the note said, here are the rules of the game. The pointer is somewhere in your classroom. You have to find it. And that was it. So I searched and searched and searched, and I found it eventually. And they would periodically steal my pointer and hide it, and that became a game. And then eventually, the one boy in the class who didn't like me broke it. And that was a really, really interesting moment for me, because all of that kind of good feeling about, I'm just having this game here, I mean, I obviously should have punished them all, but, it slightly went out the window.
Yeah.
And you could feel the resentment in the class towards this individual who had broken the sacred pointer.
I'm just thinking now, I used to play pranks in my class. Did you ever do that?
Occasionally. I did my first year class. I told them that their exams were happening at the end of the Easter holidays. And so on the last day of term, I gave them their exam timetable for the other side of the Easter holidays, and they all dutifully wrote it down. And as I did it in a more and more absurd way. So, for example, I would say things like, and on Tuesday the 11th, you got that? Nigel, Tuesday the 11th? Yes, good, that's your Spanish exam. And one of them said, well, we don't do Spanish. And then I said, well, you better learn some during the holidays then. And then three exams in a day. And then eventually one of them, a very, very clever boy who I am still in touch with, realised that it was, in fact, a sort of elaborate April Fool.
Yeah, very good. No, mine was much more basic. I remember I had a really, really good class, and you would set them off on a piece of work, and you could hear a pin drop, and there was total silence. And as a teacher, I'd get a bit bored when everything was calm and quiet. So I had a syringe.
Of course. Why did you have a syringe?
I have no idea. It was
Robert, a very colourful pound-slate gentleman. Said that syringe comes into play.
Well, I think there must have been some kind of
syringe dealt with during your interview.
No, we didn't bring that up. It must have been part of some science experiment. And I had this syringe, and what I did was at morning break, I filled it up with cold water and put it into my top drawer, awaiting the class to come back from break, knowing that they would get their heads down, they'd be working really quietly. So I thought this could be fun. So this is exactly what happened. They put their heads down, they were working away, absolute silent, beautiful. And I very quietly opened my drawer, took out the syringe and basically water pistoled about 12 kids down one side of the room, put it back in, closed the door and carried on as normal. So nobody had witnessed the fact that it was me, but 12 kids were now basically soaking and screaming like, what's going on? But they loved that. They loved the fact that had happened. And they didn't then misbehave. And the other one that I really loved doing, it was the it was the same class. And they'll know who they are.
If you think you've been affected by asbestos.
So this is back at Hutchison's Grammar School. And the class will know who they are. But every now and again, they would be sitting quietly doing their work just in exactly the same way. And I've got a very loud voice.
No.
Yeah, I do. And I would just sit quietly and then choose my moment. And I would shout at the top of my voice as loud as I possibly could, "Jump!" And of course, they all jumped. And I said, "Thank you very much. Well done. 10 out of 10.
Now, if anybody's listening from the inspectorate, I'd like to disassociate myself from that story, because I understand that there have been problems raised in Mr. Sagai's attitude towards disciplining his pupils.
It was all part of my psychology. It's all about, liking your teacher and feeling that you're all in one big team together. And I remember during these sessions when they were working away, I would take out a plastic mug and a couple of golf balls to practice my putting. And they just they would kind of look at me askance, but it became normal, and they just carried on with their work. But
yeah, I think at some point we should have a conversation about the place of the charismatic teacher, because I was just remembering our conversation the last time with Bruce, and afterwards,
yes,
when we were lunching,
yeah,
I was saying to Bruce that I didn't think I'd do all that well on his great lessons, because I didn't actually really do any of the things that he thought one should be doing. And he looked at me through, he smiled, and then he looked at me through very faintly gritted teeth, I thought, and kind of said, "Yeah, well, I think there's a limit to how successful charisma can carry you." And I think it was a really interesting point, because I actually I think teachers are very, very highly prepared these days. But let's just go back to Christmas for an instant.
Absolutely.
An instant.
Yes.
I just wondered if I'm just thinking really, Rob, that you'd be an ideal Santa. Have you ever been Santa?
No.
Apart from when you were 6. Sorry to bring that up again, because
No.
It scarred.
It scarred me.
Yes. Yeah. I've never.
I've been asked.
You've been asked?
Oh, yeah.
But you said, what did you say? No. Fiddlesticks.
No, I just said absolutely not.
Humbug, did you say?
No, I didn't. I just said absolutely not. Not today. Not now.
Oh, why?
Not
I can see
the whole.
sense.
No, the whole dressing up thing. Just
Oh, really?
Nah, it's just not for me.
Doesn't like dressing up.
Well,
see, yeah.
I mean, I can do the odd stage show, and I don't mind performing in character with lots of other people, but I don't want to be the central character on my own.
Yeah, I just didn't have the physique to be Santa, really.
Yeah, but you can create the physique.
Well, I'm not absolutely sure I would know how to do that, but
A fat suit, can I?
a fat suit.
And that I can supply the pipe cleaners and cotton wool for the beard.
Oh, yeah, you can, because I bet you've kept them. This was the beard my parents made me wear. Now, what about presents, Rod? So, I mean, famously, of course, teachers can get quite a lot of presents. I think there's a different attitude towards that now. When I started teaching, I would get quite a lot of tiny presents at Christmas. People, I still have a eraser, which I got in the shape of a banana from one boy. That would be, let me just think when that would be, 45 years ago, I think. I've still got that. And weirdly, it still smells a bit. It was meant to smell like a banana. It didn't smell like a banana. It smelled like something strange. But I still actually have that eraser. And, people used to give you little things, lots of little things at Christmas. Primary school teachers, of course, have always done brilliantly at Christmas. You used to see primary school teachers, shoving arrow loads of presents out. Yeah, laden with stuff. Back in the day, primary school, back when I started, primary school teachers were so paid less than senior school teachers. So perhaps the lots of kind of luxury soaps didn't make up for it.
Don't think I'm doing myself any favours here, but I used to say to the class,
give me things.
Well, I would hint. I would hint through the course of the year. And there was an opportunity that would always come up where I could actually say, I really don't like chocolate, because honestly, 24 boxes of chocolate, and actually it's not my thing, but I would make sure I could slip it in and also slip in the fact that I was a whiskey drinker. And lo and behold, to use a Christmas phrase, Christmas would come along and there would be crates of whiskey delivered to my desk.
So I don't drink red wine. And the problem is that for some reason, which I'm sure is a kind of sexist thing, people tend to give men red wine. So I would be in a situation whereby quite often, because I have to tell people are pretty generous, quite often people would say, "Oh, Mr. Wyllie, thanks very much indeed for, doing this, blah, 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 whatever. We'll be present for you." And it would be a bottle of red wine. And my partner drinks red wine. So at those points, I would text him and say, "I've just been given a present," which meant there is a bottle of red wine for you waiting. And some of it was really lovely wine. And eventually, my PA just said to people as they left my office, "He doesn't drink red wine." And that was really helpful because I began to get white wine, which I do drink, or indeed occasionally whiskey.
So it's not just me.
I don't know if I would go quite as far as saying to classrooms full of children, I don't eat chocolate, but I do drink whiskey. I mean, I think that's maybe a wee bit much, Rod. It's really interesting because I think lots of people out there are probably seeing you in a new light as a result of this one.
People who know me, I doubt it. But
I'll probably hear from them. Remember to give feedback.
Yeah, feedback welcomed.
What's the best ever present you've had?
Oh my goodness. The best present I think I've ever had was a beautifully presented limited edition, 1 of 500, and I've still got it, bottle of Loch Lomond Golf Invitational Whiskey.
I don't know what to say. The best present I ever got, and I don't know if you'll be listening, Lucy, but the best present I ever got was from you. And I like the poetry of Robert Frost a lot. And I taught this particular higher class 2 or 3 poems by Robert Frost. And at the end of the year, this young lady who had come to us from another school where she was not happy gave me a compass which opened up, and on the lid she had inscribed the whole of Robert Frost's The Road Not Taken. And that is one of my very favourite possessions, which I think probably if the house was burning down, that would come quite high on the... Mind you, it's brass.
I think the most
survived the fire.
I think probably the most interesting present I ever got, because of course the whiskey was from a parent, but from a kid, this box arrived at the classroom. He basically had to drag it in. It was this huge, massive box, and it was wrapped in like birthday present paper, end of the term. And to huge excitement. And the kids, I would always say, "Look, do you want to open the present just now?" And he said, no. He said, "It's for you, and it's a party in a box." And I said, Party in a box, okay. So anyway, colleagues and myself down in the staff room later, hurled this massive box down onto the table. I opened it, and it was just lovely. There was a
pole dancer.
No. There was cans of beer.
Cans of beer.
It was filled with straw, so you had to work it. But there was a book in there, and there was the streamers and party poppers, and there was chocolate, and there was 4 cans of beer, and it was just a party hat. And I just thought, it's such a thoughtful gift for a kid.
Yes.
Because they thought, I want to do something a bit different, a bit special, and I want to put a smile on his face, and it did.
I always used to... This is probably... It's a good thing I'm not working anymore, because it'd be a very dangerous thing to say, but I always used to like things that they'd made. so that you got things which were actually their product. And there was a boy I taught once a long time ago called Jamie, who'll now be what will you be now, Jamie? You'll be a surgeon, I'm guessing. But, oh, no, you're too nice. You'll be a doctor of some sort. Sorry, I didn't mean that. Surgeons are also nice. Just in case I need a surgery over Christmas.
Careful.
Anyway, but you understand what I mean. So this boy, he was my first year form class, and he gave me 2 things which he had made himself out of wood. Now, one of them, which I still use, I saw them both actually, but which I still use, was a kind of box for holding stationery, like, a couple of pens and stuff like that, which he'd made himself, and I really, really like it. I still have that. And the other thing was this object, and he handed me this object, and it was a plank of wood with a triangle cut out of the bottom and a handle. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I thought it could be some kind of arcane sex toy, and I never sided against that on the grounds of the circumstances under which it was being presented to me. But here, I had to, it was difficult because I just said, oh, fine, that's absolutely great. It was a very nicely made thing, but I had absolutely no idea what it was. He was so pleased, and, he handed this, or he said, I've made this for you. And I kind of thought, what? And I didn't feel like I could, and it was the last day of term. So I went home, and everybody I saw over Christmas, I said, does anyone know what this is? Does anyone know what this is? Does anyone know what this is? And nobody did. Nobody did. So eventually, I had to go back and I had to say to her, I really like that thing, but I've asked 2,842 people over Christmas what they know, if they know what this is. And of course, it was the days before the internet. It was a device, and it works. It was a device which you use for removing Wellington boots.
Ah.
That was clever. Anyway,
Are we a Wellington boot wearer?
I occasionally wear Wellington boots.
Okay.
Very occasionally.
So he'd spotted this,
When I'm walking around my estate.
but in the classroom?
And
Just wondering where the idea.
well, I don't know. I think he was the kind of boy who'd be wearing Wellington boots a lot.
Right.
Like in an estate. Anyway. Anyhow,
Well,
here we are.
here we are. I think that's it.
Christmas already. People will be listening to this and thinking, oh, I need to go and put my turkey in the oven.
Well, I mean, there's selling blooming Christmas trees back in October. Anyway, that's it for this episode of Two Heads Are Better Than One. We hope you've enjoyed our journey through the world of schools and leadership, and especially today's Christmas Cracker special. And if you've got thoughts, questions, or stories of your own, we'd love to hear them. And you can reach us on rodandcameron@gmail.com. Make sure to follow or subscribe so you don't miss the next. And if you enjoyed today's chat, leaving a quick review really helps more listeners find us. And remember, in education and in life, 2 heads really are better than 1. Thanks for listening. Class dismissed.
Merry Christmas to you all.
Merry Christmas.